Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk bugle, it's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's bugle 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BS and no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? The Elk Talk Podcast is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, ensuring the future of elk, other wildlife, their habitat, and our hunting heritage. To become a member, go to rmef.org.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by Mountain Ops, making outdoor energy and performance nutrition to make you a stronger and healthier elk hunter. They have a full line of hunting-related supplements, including meal replacement shakes, multivitamins, pre-workout fuel, and post-workout recovery. And my favorite, their new performance protein bars that, by the way, are packed with 270 calories and 20 grams of protein, but contain less than 6 grams of sugar. Visit mountainops.com to learn more and to order, and be sure to use the promo code ELKTALK to save on your next order.
The podcast is also brought to you by Gerber. Go to gerbergear.com and learn about the knives, the Vital, the Big Game Vital, the Gator Premium, all the things that we use when we're out in the woods, and not just knives, but also some really cool multi-tools that they have.
And we have a promo code for Gerber as well. Just use the code ELKTALK to save 20% on your orders at gerbergear.com. And we are also brought to you by Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. And Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls is the original designer and inventor of the pallet plate diaphragm that's completely changed the way elk calls are made and used. And to find out more and to order your elk calls, go to RockyMountainHuntingCalls.com or BuglingBull.com and use promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save 15% on all of your elk calls and elk call accessories.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by GoHunt.com. Go to GoHunt.com and sign up for the Insider. The Insider is changing how hunts and hunting information are found. No doubt about that. Use promo code ELKTALK, and when you sign up for the Insider, you're going to get $50 of store credit, mad money, in their gear shop.
Lastly, the University of Elk Hunting online course is a proud partner of the Elk Talk Podcast. And within the University of Elk Hunting online course, you're going to find nearly 60 chapters organized in 17 modules of elk hunting instruction aimed at making you a more successful elk hunter. From planning and e-scouting to calling strategies and packing, every imaginable elk hunting topic is included in the online course. And regardless of your previous elk hunting experience or success, I'm confident the University of Elk Hunting online course will make you a more confident, more successful elk hunter. Just visit elk101.com and use the promo code ELKTALK to save 20% when you sign up for a membership to the University of Elk Hunting online course.
And with that, Corey, we are ready to get into it.
Let's jump into it.
Good morning, Corey.
Morning.
How's life in Idaho?
It is the same. It's good.
Really?
Yeah, we're not having a winter yet. It's cold. We're getting winter temperatures, but no moisture for a long time.
Yeah, we have no snow on the ground here. And I live south of Bozeman in the foothills, and that's like the snow trap of the Gallatin Valley. And I have no snow in my yard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a lot of dog turds. My neighbors they sick their dog over to my yard. Hey, go poop in Randy's yard.
I'm not sure that's a good thing.
It's not a good thing. I'm gonna have to go talk to my neighbor and say, all right, I love your dogs, man, and if they want to poop in my yard, that's fine. But this spring, I hope you're going to clean it up.
Yeah, it might be easier to clean up now than in the spring.
Yeah.
Speaking of neighbors' dogs, well, me being a neighbor, we just got a new puppy.
You did?
Yeah.
What'd you get?
Well, we had a blue heeler I bought for my wife. I bought and gave it to my wife on Valentine's Day, the first year we were married, and he died probably 5 years ago. And just, with our schedule and us going all the time, it's been hard to justify having a dog, especially a puppy. So the kids, though, have been relentless. And we gave them, an incentive, said if all three of them got 4.0s in school at the same time, we would buy a dog, thinking that would work. And that seems to just drive their grades lower. But my daughter found one a while back on Craigslist and sent me a picture of it, and it was half lab and half border collie. And I thought it was a cute little puppy. And, I didn't really look into that puppy necessarily, but I did start doing some research on that breed of dog and was liking what I was finding. And I ended up searching for a black lab border collie mix and found a litter, and they had a male and a female left. So we surprised the kids and took them to look at them, and they got out, and we bought a female black lab border collie mix. And the appealing part to me was the size. They don't get as big as a lab. Mm-hmm. The nose, they have incredible noses. The intelligence, they're incredibly easy to train. And I saw a picture of one with a shed antler in its mouth, and I was sold.
I knew there had to be a motive.
There was a side motive for sure. So we are training Coda to be a shed dog, and she is doing incredibly well at, what is she, 11 weeks now? So
wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good disruption to normal behavior in your house, because if it's like most pups, well, maybe you got the black lab part out of it, because I had a male black lab and then I had a female chocolate lab. The female chocolate lab loved garden hoses, and the male chocolate lab or male black lab liked to chew on anything until it was about 1.5 years old. Shoes, the stock of your shotgun, the butt of your shotgun, couch. The list goes on and on. My female chocolate lab ate a rug one day. And so I had to take her to the vet. They had to do surgery because of these synthetic rugs. Obviously, they can't digest it. My dog's about ready to die. So, just add another $500 a month to the household budget.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it didn't breed out the lab chewing. She likes to chew on everything from your pinky finger to the side of a coffee table to anything. So she's not as bad as our blue heeler. Our blue heeler never outgrew chewing, and it was same thing. We tried and tried everything we could, and we just finally had to basically chew proof everything that we put him up against. And we had a kennel, a big dog run on the side of our house, and he chewed the siding off of our house when he was like 9 years old. So it wasn't like he was a year old and doing it. He chewed even when he got older. So.
Huh. Well, I thought you were going to tell me you got a blood trailing dog or something, because I've become friends with a guy named Damon Bungard who has they call it the Blood Trailing Dog Association, where if you have a wounded animal, these really highly trained dogs will go and help you recover your animal.
Yep.
But now I realize you've got even a better motive in mind. That's your shed antler hunting. I have 2 elk antlers hanging in my shop that are sheds. And the only reason they came out of the Wyoming desert with me is I couldn't find a tree to hang them.
I was going to say, I saw a video on YouTube of you a few days ago, and you're standing in your shop with a shed antler draped over your shoulder. And I thought, wait, something's wrong here, because Randy doesn't carry shed antlers. And if that ended up in his shed, there's a reason for it.
Yeah. So I've already promised them to one of my CPA clients. He said, "Boy, I'd like to have a shed antler someday." I'm like, "You know what? I got 2 of them for you. Come out to my shop." So he's not come out there yet, but they're for him. I have no use for him, but I'm glad you got, now if you just get a couple llamas to pack your shed antlers, I think you'll be set.
I've texted Bo a couple times and expressed my interest. I haven't heard back, so I'm I don't know. Well, we'll probably be taking llamas shed hunting with us this spring. I don't know if I will be an owner of them or not, but they proved their worth.
Yeah, that gets to one of the questions I was thumbing through last night. I had way too much time, and I was trying to catch up on I'm embarrassed to say how many emails while I've been on the road, but I sorted them by Elk Talk Podcast. And some people ask, they know that you're an avid shed antler hunter. They asked if you use that in any way where it's like a scouting tool that you somehow implement into your fall hunting strategies.
Yeah, so actually we can, that leads into my fall rifle hunt pretty well, because we found a new shed hunting spot. Well, not a new, we'd known about it, but we took the plunge and went shed hunting in a spot this last spring that would have been good. It was good. We went in early and we saw a lot of elk, and we fly, Tyler, the guy I share an office with, and I split the costs, and we get in a plane and we fly for shed hunting, usually about the middle of March, and just kind of get a tab on where the bulls are, because the bulls are separated from the cows that time of year. And so we'll fly, and we go over our normal areas we like to hit, and just make sure, okay, yeah, the elk are still in there. Maybe they're up a couple ridges this year. The snow line's lower, so they're down lower, and just get an idea of where they're at. So when we go in there, we aren't searching for the elk, we're searching for the antlers. And we've flown over this place before, and it's always intrigued us, but it's a bit of a haul to get in there. And we took the plunge this spring and went in there, but we went early, and all the bulls pretty much were still packing, except for 2 or 3 that just looked like dinosaurs. And I actually glassed up a fresh antler, I think it was March 17th, laying on a ridge, and took a picture of it through my binoculars with my phone. And it was a giant, but it was too far. We were in there, had maybe an hour and a half until dark, and it probably would have taken me 3 hours to hike over there. But then we were several miles into this area and had to go back out. So I said, no problem. I can't believe anybody would be in here and pick it up. So we left it. And when I went back in, it was gone, as well as 3 or 4 white sheds that I had spotted on that same hillside. They had been cleaned out. But I took my boys in there on that trip, and we packed out, gosh, I don't remember, but I think probably 12 or 13 fresh elk sheds and a handful of older, year or 2 old ones. And that's after a couple other people had been in there and really creamed it. And I talked to one of the guys, he'd found quite a few sheds. But anyway, that leads into, I saw all those bulls in there, and I started doing some e-scouting and realized there's really nowhere for those elk to go. They can't migrate in there from very far away. And I know a couple other winter grounds where there are elk that maybe would migrate out of mountains into those areas. But this specific area, once you hit the top of the mountain, it's a wasteland. And I just couldn't believe that they would travel uphill and then drop back down into this area in order to winter there. So my thought was, we're gonna archery hunt there and should be able to get into some bulls. And we did archery hunt in there a day or 2. In fact, Dale went with us one of the days, and that's when he said he was never going back in there. And if we were going back in there, we needed a new camera guy. And so we didn't. But we managed to buy leftover non-resident elk tags in Idaho last year, and we got them for the rifle season in this area. And
so a second elk tag.
Yep. So we went.
You can do that. And before anyone gets all fired up, residents of Idaho can do that.
So can non-residents.
If they're available.
So can non-residents. Really? Yeah, non-residents can buy an extra tag, and it's good. Like the tags that we bought, we got one for archery season that was an A tag that's good for any elk bull, cow, any size. And then the rifle hunt is good for any antlered elk, the tag that we got. So
Okay.
we, the last 2 years, the fishing game's actually sold out of the non-resident elk tags, so there haven't been leftover ones, but we found a little loophole last year where a couple leftover tags got added to a pool that was available if you were on the ball and ready for it. And as soon as those tags were added, we were there waiting, and we ended up buying 2 of them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
so typically we hunted Montana last year with you on that rifle hunt. And that's really the first time I've extended my season into October or November.
Mm-hmm.
And this year we thought, hey, we've got rifle tags in Idaho, so it's another week of hunting. But the real dilemma was, how do we get in there with camp and stay for a week? And then how do we pack elk out of there? And we did a podcast a while ago with our friend Bo Beatty, who just happens to own a whole bunch of llamas. Yeah. And that proved to be the solution we were looking for. So we packed up camp on 4 llamas, and we hiked into this area, and we set up camp, and we tended llamas and hunted with llamas and packed with llamas for the next 5 days.
Cool.
And it was a lot like the drive home from the hospital with our firstborn child. There's a sense of anxiety and fear and unknown and feeling like you aren't prepared. And I definitely went through that taking llamas, because it was me and Donnie and cameraman John, and we had nobody that had any experience with llamas other than I petted them last year at camp when Bo used them to pack out Donnie's elk.
Yep.
So that was my only experience. So Bo actually drove them up to our house and delivered them for me, and gave us about an hour training on how to put the saddles on them and what their names were. And I took pictures of the saddles on them because the names were on the saddles, so I'd remember their names. And it's a good thing I did that, because I would not have remembered which one was which. But by the end of the week, they certainly have personalities, and you end up with your favorites, and you end up with labels of knotheads for the ones that are knotheads. And it hands down, though, for that kind of a hunt, there's not a better way that I could think of to hunt elk.
Yeah. So this all started with your shed hunting.
This all started with shed hunting. This area, we would have never, I've thought about going in there, but seeing all the elk that were in there in the spring, the size of some of the bulls that were in there in the spring, I just thought they have to still be in there in the fall. Yeah. And unfortunately, they weren't. So.
But there were some elk in there, obviously.
There were some, and there may have been more in there, but we didn't see another person. We were in there 5 days, never saw another person. There was an outfitter that had been in there, but they weren't in there when we were in there. We didn't see a lot of sign, though. There was some archery sign, 3/4 of the way up the mountain, which the reason that it's not just hard to access, but hard to hunt, we had to camp down at the bottom because that's where the water was. Yep. And it was 2,500 vertical feet each day to get up to the elk zone. Oh. So we left the llamas just because there was no water up on the mountain, and we left them at camp, and we had to come down every night and go up every morning. And so I shot my elk on day 4. So we had made 4 trips up the mountain, 2,500 feet, and 2,500 feet just to get to the elevation where the elk were. There were a couple days we hit 3,000 feet in vertical elevation, and we shot the elk at, I think it was 2,800 feet above camp. So get this, and I'll tell more of the story, but I want to throw this out there. We shoot the elk. We don't have llamas with us. Obviously, we're hiking each day without llamas. We shoot the elk, and the elk drops, and we go over to it and take some pictures. And I'm thinking, okay, there's 3 of us. We've got our packs. It's going to be heavy because it was a good-sized elk and big body, big mountain bull, and they're going to be heavy. But we've packed out an elk in one trip with 3 of us multiple times before, and it's not fun, but it's all downhill. And yes, it's steep downhill, but at least we aren't climbing uphill with the load. So in my mind, I'm preparing, thinking, okay, I'll take a hind and a front. That's probably going to be 110, 120 pounds. Plus, I'm going to have to pack the antlers. Plus, I have my gear that's probably 25 pounds from the day. And I'm thinking, okay, I can do it. Just one time, I've got trekking poles. We'll do it. Cameraman John says, I want to get some content of us packing elk with llamas. I will walk back to camp and bring 2 llamas back up to load the elk on the llamas and then pack out with the llamas. Cameraman John dropped 2,800 feet in vertical elevation, and it was probably 3.5 miles back to camp. Got 2 llamas, and again, John didn't do any. I mean, he didn't saddle up the llamas. We showed him pictures on our cell phones up on the mountain of what it looked like to saddle them up. He went down, picked out the 2 we told him to bring, saddled them up, brought them up there, and was back, climbed the 2,800 feet and 3.5 miles back up to us. And we loaded 3/4 of the elk on 2 llamas. I think I had the antlers and probably 25 pounds of meat. And then John and Donnie each had probably 30 or 35 pounds of meat in addition to gear that they had hiking out of there. So John was the hero on that trip.
Whoa. I hope you gave him a big bonus.
No, I just told him, him going down and doing that just prevented him from having to haul the biggest portion of the elk off the mountain. So
wow.
But he did capture some really cool pictures of us with the llamas and packing and, right at dark. We literally got to the ridge at dark. I think we got back to camp around midnight. Those llamas were incredible.
Yeah. Wow. That's a way to thin out the competition.
Yeah.
You would have had no competition from me if we were in camp and you said, I'm going to climb up there and shoot a bull at 2,800 feet. I'd say, you know what, Corey, I'll have dinner ready when you get back.
Well, you remember I did invite you to go with us.
I know. Yeah. And you used the key terms, steep and deep. Yeah. And I said, you know what, Corey, I'm going to be busy that week. I'm trying to save my marriage. Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I just, John didn't have any experience at all with llamas. My experience was a 1-hour training from Bo, and we did not have a single negative issue with llamas. Like nothing, not anything. I formed a great friendship with one of them. Johnny is if Johnny's ever available when I need a llama, he is at the top of my request list.
Yeah. Well, before anyone gets too carried away with this, the ticket of what you did, and there's a few guys like Bo who have highly trained pack llamas that are bred for mountain packing, that get a lot of exercise and have done this. It's not their quote unquote first rodeo. And that makes all the difference in the world, because you will hear these stories out there of, I wouldn't take one of those spitting, stubborn, stinky things in the woods for anything. Well, they probably had a pasture llama that they pulled out of their brother-in-law's sheep flock and thought it was going to be ready to go pack 100 pounds of elk.
Yep.
So getting them from the right person and making sure they're highly fit, trained athletes is key.
So just to give you an idea, when we came back down the mountain, we were on a ridge that was, it was a gradual descent. We dropped probably 1,000 feet in elevation on this ridge, going mile and a half, probably a mile and a half. And we hit where we had to choose to either stay on the ridge and go left where it dropped off rather steeply, or drop straight off to the right. And when we got there, it's dark, and I have a pretty good headlamp, and I shined it down and thought, there is no way in the world I'm going down this, let alone a llama with, we had 80 pounds on Johnny. No, Johnny was less. Johnny had 70. I think Tokyo had 80. And I'm looking at it going, there is no way that I don't trust myself to go down it. If that llama even stumbles, it will roll 1,500 vertical feet to the bottom.
Yeah.
And so we didn't. But as we turned to the left there, John said, right here's where I came up. And I said, what? He said, yeah, I turned off the trail down there at the mouth of the creek and came straight up this. He took those 2 llamas up it, and he's like, they did phenomenal. They didn't even balk at it. They walked right up this mountain. They followed me everywhere. They didn't tug. They didn't pull. He's like, they had worked. They were out of breath a few times. We had to stop, but he came straight up that mountain with those llamas. And when we went down the other way, which was still, there were times that I'm looking at it going, it's not dangerous, but with load on your back, if you fall, you might roll a couple times and have to grab onto something to stop you. Those llamas were pushing us, like not nudging us like in a bad way, but they were totally fine. When I would slow down, think maybe I'd take this a little bit slower, they're like, why are you slowing down? We're good. Just keep going. It was so impressive.
They are so impressive. I told the story on a prior podcast about my Colorado elk hunt, first rifle hunt, went back in, took us 7 hours to get back there. I think we were 7.5 miles, and we had 4 llamas, me, 2 camera guys, and it was incredible how comfortable we could be because llamas.
Yep.
And then when I shot a bull, I thought dead fallen llamas is a train wreck. And it could be at times, but they are so good at picking their way. If you can step over it, maybe slightly below your crotch, they are such athletes. They just like bloop, and they're over it, even with 100 pounds on their back. And so we extracted my bull out of that deadfall. And then the next day, they carried, it took 2.5 llamas for the bull and the antlers and all the meat. And then we carried our camps out, and they carried some of the extra camp gear. But it separates the competition, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And so you're going to rent some for antler. What do you guys call it? Antler hunting?
Yeah. You know what? When I was younger, and I grew up in a logging town, so everybody called it horn hunting. And
Okay.
we were horn hunters, and we found 3 horns today. And obviously, elk and deer grow antlers, not horns. But it was just the community I grew up in and the way we did it. But as I've gotten a little bit older, I've switched. So we antler hunt now, and we find antlers, and it's probably the correct terminology to use.
Okay. Well, I wasn't sure what you call it.
It's addicting. And you and I, we talked with Tyler Crockett, a year and a half ago or so on the podcast, had him on, and he and I shared our addiction to it. But it's just, man, we're already planning trips for next year, and knowing that we have llamas, we're taking a base camp in, and we're setting up a comfy camp. And the good news is, in the spring, the elk are all within 1,500 feet of where we're going to camp. So they come down the mountain a little bit farther, and we won't have to, going up and down each day is not going to be near as taxing as it was elk hunting. But
yeah, well, maybe I'll come with if you'll let me shoot the black bears.
There are black bears in there, but it's still steep and deep.
Oh, how about that? I've shot enough bears. I don't need to hurt myself.
There's easier places to find a bear.
So back to the original question. In some places, I suspect where you find shed antlers probably does have a correlation to a hunting strategy for the fall.
Yes, and that's, it really comes down to where are they migrating from, and knowing where the majority of the elk are coming from, because they do have winter grounds, and there will be herds, multiple herds that converge on these winter grounds from different areas. They may even be in different units, where they are during the hunting season to where they go on winter grounds. But if you know where they're coming from and you know where they go, there can be an advantage. And in some places like this area we were at, there are some resident elk that live 500 feet in elevation above where they shed their antlers. And so, if you do antler hunt and you happen to find a really big one or a unique one or a lot of them, there could be some correlation to where they will be in the fall and your hunting plan.
Yeah, I talked to my friends in eastern Montana, central Montana, some guys I know in central Wyoming, where the elk really aren't that migratory because you're not talking about big elevation differences. And they find some whopper antlers. And for them, it's not so much about where they're going to find the elk in the fall, but to know that, hey, there's some really good bulls in this drainage or that ridge or whatever. So they use it for that. And they always ask me, you want to come out and join us? No, not really. Yeah, I can watch the grass grow here on my porch.
You are missing out. There's nothing like watching grass grow and wildflowers sprout in the backcountry in the spring when there's a white tip of an antler poking up through that newly sprouted green grass and wildflowers.
Do you ever sell any of them?
Yeah, we sell almost all of them. So it's my kids. In fact, my boys, when I took them in there, we shed hunted one day. So we hiked in the evening before. Our whole family went in and did a little bivvy hunt. And the boys and I went down and climbed up the mountain and shed hunted and got back to camp at dark. And the next day we loaded up and hiked out of there. But they each made, I think, $200 that day off of the antlers they had. And, I found probably twice as many as they did. Probably as many as they did combined. So we sell them and it pays for the gas and buys us a new pair of boots or a new backpack or something. But
yeah, well, maybe I'm going to have to take up shed antler hunting, Corey, but I see there's an awful lot of competition for it. So I don't think I can run the hills fast enough to compete with some of the guys who I know do it, yourself included.
That's the truth. It's getting, especially this year with COVID and everything, this spring, there were more people out there crawling around than I've ever seen. And just hoping the whole pandemic's over so people have to go back to work this spring and can't be out there picking up sheds.
There you go. Corey's all for the vaccine.
Exactly.
So got to go back to work. So I'm going to take this another step further then, and it's kind of my own question. Are there, in Montana, most of the elk herds that I hunt, it doesn't do you much good to scout in the spring or in the summer because the elk are going to be way further back in way different places come September and October. Are there other things you're doing in the spring or summer or whatever months that are fun to get out and do and maybe just good family things that are adding to your knowledge bank that you're going to apply come hunting season?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, you nailed it right there. So many of the western states, the mountain elk migrate so far that it really, you can't scout them in the spring and even the summer. Like you mentioned, they're going back up and they're going as far up the mountain as they can. But when the rut starts, the cows are still down where they had the calves and they don't go as far up the mountain. So as bulls leave that summer range and they go down looking for the cows. And so you might have, elk on trail camera all summer, bulls on trail camera all summer, and you go up there all excited to hunt it opening weekend and you don't see a single elk and there hasn't been a fresh elk track for 2 weeks there and you don't see another elk in there all season. But what I did find was some of those areas like that, those higher areas, we found elk in rifle season this year in those summer areas. And I had not correlated that before, and I don't know that there is a huge correlation, but some of those areas where I had seen elk this summer, where they disappeared during the fall, and we knew they would disappear, we weren't expecting to find them there. But when we went back to the areas where we expected to find them, they weren't there. And as we went farther up the mountain, we found them back in their summer area after the rut. And then, of course, they drop down from there and migrate out once the snow starts, and who knows where they go from there. But we're spending time just learning area, even though there aren't going to be elk in the area during the summer. We'll go in camp and go hike and look for signs of wallows or rubs from last season to say, okay, here's another pocket that we haven't hunted before where it looks like the elk rut. So I'm not looking for elk necessarily in the summer, but I'm looking for signs of previous rut. We'll go and, just explore new country areas that I've never even been to. I've always wanted to go up there and see. And so we'll take a family camping trip and go up there and maybe an overnight hiking trip and do some fishing in a lake. And, as we're hiking in and out, my eyes are scouring for rubs and wallows from the previous season and making mental note of that or marking it on my mapping system. And so, yeah, there's definitely some value in spending time in elk country in the spring and summer, but you have to know what you're looking for and what's realistic to find and how it's going to help you in the fall.
Yeah. Well, for me, wolf hunting gives me a chance or a time or a reason to be out near the wintering elk, because the wolves are near the wintering elk here in Montana. And one thing I'm always amazed at is Montana, it's almost like we hate elk as hard as we hunt them. We start hunting them in August with what's called shoulder seasons, the idea of shoulder season being the period before the general season on one end and the period of the general season on the other. And then we give 6 weeks of archery, give the elk 5 days off, and then we go after them for 5 days of rifle. And then we usually do a month or two of cow hunting on the other end of the shoulder seasons. But with all that pressure, when I'm out wolf hunting, I'm still astounded at the quality and age class that I find in a lot of units in Montana. And that's what, so I'll make note of that, because I've got a whole lot of places where I go when I have time to wolf hunt. And I'll make mental note of, wow, look at the quality of bulls that made it through hunting season here. I think I'm going to go do some archery elk hunting over here. Obviously not where I'm seeing them in December and January, but I know where those elk come from. I know, all right, this wintering area, these elk come 12 miles from whatever drainage it is or whatever mountain. And so it does impact where I decide to go hunt a little bit. Not in a specific sense, but more in a general sense.
Yep.
And, I don't know. I think it's just the hunter mentality that even when I'm driving down the road, my wife doesn't like to ride with me. She's like, you're always looking somewhere, looking for some critter or something. Yep. I think every time I'm on the road, I'm like, oh, is that a burn up there? Or what's going on out there? Hear the rumble strip over there. And she's like, watch where you're going. Yeah, you want to drive. In fact, she knows that I'm such an antelope junkie that she will not let me drive through Wyoming if she's in the car. She's like, if we're going through Wyoming, I'm driving, because you've almost killed us 4 times. So I think it's just us as hunters. We're always taking advantage of whatever we're doing to try and increase our knowledge that might help us in hunting season.
Just looking for a hand up. Yeah, I mean, a leg up on the competition, and the elk are out there. They're learning every day. They're living it, and the more time we spend, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. So I got to ask you that you talked about how Idaho, how residents or non-residents could possibly buy a second tag in Idaho for both deer or for elk. Well, Idaho this year changed the allocation, not the allocation. Am I saying this right?
Yeah, they did.
So they put a cap on certain zones, and they raised the fee of both the hunting license and the elk tag. And those tags went on sale December 1st. And someone told me they sold out within like a day or two. Is that true?
Well, there's some truth. So last year, we started hearing some buzz that residents were unhappy because non-residents were taking over the state of Idaho, and that they were, non-residents had increased so much in the last few years that it was just, hunting was no good here anymore. Well, the reality of that is the number of non-resident elk tags in Idaho has been capped forever.
That's what I was going to say, 12,815 tags.
You got it. Yep, and it has not changed.
Yeah, so how does that get blamed on non-residents?
Well, non-residents, the tag allocation hasn't changed, but in 2006, you could buy a leftover non-resident tag. So if that quota of 12,800 had not been filled, they kept track of how many non-resident tags were still available, and a resident could go and pay the non-resident price and have a second tag. Okay. Or pay it again and have a third tag. Whoa. Or pay it again and have a fourth tag. And non-residents could do the same. So you could literally, there was no cap. After a couple of years of that, I think they realized that that wasn't a good plan, so they limited it. You could only buy one extra leftover non-resident tag, whether you were a resident or a non-resident. So, what is it, $416 it's been in the past for a non-resident elk tag. I pay the $36.50 as a resident for mine, and if there's a leftover one after August 1st, then I could go and pay the $416.75 and have a second tag that was good for, I could buy it for an antlered hunt, and I could buy it for the same unit as I was archery hunting in for another archery tag. I could buy it for a rifle tag in a completely separate unit on the other side of the state. As long as there were unlimited quota non-resident tags in that unit, and as long as there was the overall quota for non-residents hadn't been met. Last year, so that's just kind of the backstory to say that until 3 years ago, there were always leftover non-resident tags on August 1st. And so, even into hunting season, there were times that I would shoot an elk on September 10th and realize, hey, we still have a couple days to hunt. I'm going to go buy another tag and go down to the Walmart and buy another leftover non-resident elk tag.
At the non-resident price.
At the non-resident price. 2 years ago, they sold out, I want to say August 16th, 17th, something like that. So a few residents were able to buy the non-resident leftover tags after that August 1st deadline. And, 2 weeks later, they were all sold out. So those of us who procrastinated that year were going to wait until September, didn't get an opportunity. This past year, all of the non-resident tags were sold out in June. So there were no opportunities for anyone to buy a second tag in Idaho this last year. During all of that going on, Fish and Game's hearing from residents and non-residents ruining hunting. And to a degree, there were certain areas where maybe that was true, because there were a lot of units that non-residents were not capped. And so that 12,800 cap, there was nobody saying, we're going to give 100 non-resident tags to this unit and 50 over here. Literally, a good portion of that 12,800 could have ended up in the exact same unit. Now, it didn't happen like that, but there are probably some areas where it was more likely to see non-residents and a higher ratio of non-residents there. So what the Fish and Game decided to do was, we are going to raise prices.
To $651.
Yep. So another $250 almost on top of it. So, what's that, a 60% increase in price? Pretty steep increase. And then in units where there were no quotas for non-residents previously, they looked at some number and some percentage and created a quota. And so there is a limited number of elk tags for non-residents by zone or unit in the state of Idaho.
Okay. But the total number of 12,800 tags is still the non-resident cap. It's just in each zone there could be, I'll call it sub-quotas or a sub-cap.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not 100% sure if they kept it the same. I'm looking here to see. Yes, the quota is 12,815.
Yeah.
And as of today, which this opened 2 weeks ago, there's still 4,000 non-resident tags available in the state of Idaho. So they didn't, all the non-resident tags didn't sell out, but several of the more popular units, those quotas within those zones did sell out.
Okay. Huh. Well, I mean, it's kind of like a game of sport in the West that you blame everything on non-residents, right?
Totally.
Some guy sent me a pretty scathing email about quit telling non-residents to come to Montana. They're ruining my hunting spot. And so I said, I'm sensitive to that. I've got more people in my hunting spots, quote unquote, my spot. I don't have any spots. I said, but they all have resident license plates when I'm at the trailhead, just about. Because in Montana, we've had the number of non-residents capped for boy, a long time at 17,000. I can't remember when it's been so long. So I'm not sure where all these non-residents are skirting the 17,000 number cap here in Montana to be ruining all of our hunting. But when I look at the numbers, Montana has, I'm looking at population growth. Montana has, since 1990, an extra, 270,000 residents over the last 30 years. And let's say that 20% of them hunt just like 20% of the existing population hunts. That's an extra 54,000 resident hunters in the hills. But down at the bar or the coffee shop, you got to blame the non-residents.
Totally.
Because they aren't there to defend themselves.
Well, not only that, but they're just a inferior pawn in the whole game, right? I mean,
yeah,
they're just
they don't get to vote.
Yeah,
they get to pay more, and we get to kick them around as residents.
Yeah.
But you know how much your state's population has increased since 1990?
I don't know, but I know it's significant.
780,000 people since 1990.
Yeah.
And if even 10% of those people hunt, that's 78,000 new resident hunters in the hills.
Yep.
In Colorado, their population since 1990 has increased by 2.4 million.
Is there anywhere that's decreased?
No. Wyoming has the smallest increase since 1990.
And if you've ever been to Wyoming in the spring or the winter, you'll know why.
Yeah.
Because even as enticing as it is to be a resident and be able to hunt all the species there and good hunting, I don't think I could handle a winter.
You got to be a tough dude to hang out in the winter in Wyoming when the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
But if we do the math, let's say Wyoming, they're the lowest increase. 125,000 new residents since 1990. If 10% of those hunt, that's 12,500 new resident elk hunters. Just due to, what do they call it, migration, emigration, immigration, whatever. I always mix it up. But so I think Wyoming, I can't remember what the cap is. I think it's like 7,250 or 7,500 non-resident tags in total for elk. General tags plus limited entry tags. So just the growth in residents in the lowest population growth state in the West is more tags, more new resident hunters than there are all the non-resident tags.
By double in the lowest increase.
Yeah. So let's just assume, I don't think it's unreasonable in these intermountain states, at least Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming, to assume that 10% of the people hunt.
Oh, that's the reason they're moving here. I think a lot of them is because of the hunting opportunities for residents.
Yeah. So in your state, if you apply a 10% number, that's 78,000 new hunters, new resident hunters.
Yep.
And the flip side of that is you cap your non-resident elk hunters at 12,815.
And it's been like that since 1990, probably. So
yeah. So that's 6 times the number of new resident hunters as there are in total since time, however long it's been capped. The increase in resident hunters using a 10% participation rate is resulted in 6 times as many new resident hunters as is the cap for non-resident elk hunters in Idaho.
Yep.
Now, I don't even know what the participation rate is in Colorado, but given they smoke some of that funny stuff down there,
and they voted to bring wolves in.
Yeah. I mean, we gotta, Colorado is the outlier. Okay. So I don't know what percentage to apply,
but it's at least less than half.
Yeah. So 2.4 million new residents. How many of those are hunters? 3%? 5%?
I would have to think that it's Yeah, I mean, realistically, I would think it's probably over 10%, but just for the sake of math and being conservative, 3 to 5%.
Yeah, if you use 5%, that's another 120,000 resident hunters in the hills in Colorado.
Yep.
And then you get to these states in Arizona, Utah, Nevada, where there's a cap on the resident tag numbers because everything's on a limited draw, pretty much. Well, Arizona has increased 3.6 million new residents since that time. So it's no wonder residents have a harder time drawing tags, because if the number of elk tags allocated each year to manage the herd, and Arizona Game and Fish does a heck of a job adjusting every year, 3.6 million, even if 1% of those hunt, that's another 36,000 applicants for that pool of resident tags.
It's crazy.
Then you take Nevada, which is the third. So it's Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, Utah in terms of total number of increased residents. Nevada is up 1.88 million people since 1990. And they have such a tight restriction on their elk tags because they only have so many elk. If 5% of those people hunt, that's another 90,000 applicants for those resident Nevada elk tags. And we can just go on and on through all these states. My point being that as much as in Montana we want to blame you non-residents, we're blowing smoke when we say that. Because we've capped you non-residents since Moby Dick was a minnow. Or we're close to that long. And the increase that I'm seeing are residents. These are resident license plates I'm seeing at the trailhead. And you kind of want to grumble like, oh man, when I started hunting here in 1993, I hardly saw anybody in here. Well, now there's guys from Bozeman and Whitehall and Butte and Kalispell. What's going on? But when I go down to the coffee shop at the Western Cafe, it's like, dang non-residents. You really don't have any street cred if you aren't blaming the non-residents for something. That and Californians. I mean, that's you blame everything on here.
Yep.
So I hate to interject some fact and data to that comment or that criticism, but that's the reality. We have seen way larger increases in resident numbers than we will ever see in non-resident numbers, because every one of these states, with the exception of Colorado's over-the-counter second and third rifle seasons, every one of these states cap non-residents, and some of these states even cap residents. So pretty hard to blame the non-residents when they're already capped.
Yep, that's for sure.
Wow.
That's depressing to listen to. And that's, I guess we get a lot of emails that I see come through for the Elk Talk podcast. And several of them, we talked about point creep and, point systems in the different states. And, we're talking about Idaho here specifically, and we don't have a point system, and I hope we never do. But we've gotten a lot of emails saying, what is the solution? It just seems like we're backed into a wall and there is no solution. Somebody has to quit hunting.
Yeah. So I get that same comment of, what's the answer? And from a bigger view, the 30,000 foot level, as they say, do we want to figure out point schemes and other elaborate methods to slant favor in front of or in favor of the old gray-haired guy like me, which if you never work on growing the size of the pie, it's just a fight over a static or smaller pie. And that's where you and I are big fans of the Elk Foundation, because they're the ones helping build a bigger elk pie. That is something we can all do to help the opportunity and lessen the competition for tags, is to put more elk on the mountain. the pie is bigger.
Yep.
So I mean, I know as population just grows and grows and grows and habitat shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, we can't grow elk numbers as fast as the population is growing. But we can do as much as we possibly can to mitigate that. That's one of the tools to offset it. And I get off my soapbox now.
That's not a soapbox. That's a planned platform there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tired of the notion. So I'm going to get back on my soapbox. I'm sick and tired of the notion that we have to fight over a smaller pie. If people spend as much time trying to build a bigger pie, a bigger pool of elk, a larger herd, if they spend as much time doing that as they do on Facebook or on forums, whining and complaining about woe is me or the world is coming to an end or whatever, whatever's wrong with the state of hunting. If they channel that energy towards conservation efforts, towards habitat, towards volunteering, we could be building a much bigger pool of elk.
Preach, Randy. It's the truth, and that's just
right.
And to Idaho Fish and Game's credit, what they're doing wasn't trying to limit non-residents; it was trying to spread non-residents out and manage them by zone, which they hadn't done before. Before it was basically you did have to choose your zone, but everybody could choose the same zone. So what they did this year was they just set up a quota by zone so they could manage the distribution of non-resident hunters. And, there's definitely going to be some hunters that say, I've hunted this area forever and the tags are all sold out there. Well, there's still 4,000 tags left in the state of Idaho right now. So it's not like anybody's going to be able to say, I can't get my tag. They just might not be able to get the tag that they want and to go there. But there's still hunting available for non-residents in Idaho. And the way the Fish and Game did it was if there was a high percentage of non-residents, ratio of non-residents to resident hunters in an area above 15%, they capped it at 15%. So if 25% of the hunters in a specific zone in the past had been non-residents, in the future only 15% could be. Zones that were 10 to 14% non-residents were capped at 10% of that number. And zones with less than 10% were also capped at 10%. So they didn't change the overall number of non-resident hunters. They just distributed them throughout the state. As deer hunters, though, and I know this is the Elk Talk podcast, but just to mention deer hunters in the state of Idaho, because if you buy an elk tag in Idaho, you buy the license, you're coming here. Most of the time there's a deer season going on. So I know a lot of non-residents also bought deer tags.
Yep.
Deer tags, the quota hasn't changed. It's 15,500 for non-residents. But in the past, you chose either a whitetail tag or a regular tag. And a regular tag was primarily devoted to mule deer hunting. A whitetail tag was primarily dedicated to whitetail hunting. And you could hunt the entire state with a regular deer tag. You just had to follow the different seasons in the different zones. And the species that was open at the time that fit your tag, now it's managed by unit. So you have to choose a unit that you're going to hunt in the state of Idaho for deer.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's better than going to a limited entry draw for all your deer.
Yep, absolutely. Which I think is where they're probably going to go for non-residents, just looking at how the system worked this year, because this year you could log in before they started selling the tags. They went on sale at 10 o'clock on December 1st or whatever the time was. You could log in before that and they sent you to a waiting room. And in that waiting room, a virtual waiting room, you were assigned a number. So there were people that thought I can buy a tag at 10 o'clock. They log on at 10 o'clock and find out you're number 5,120 in the waiting room. And the person who's number one doesn't even get to start until 10 o'clock. And then he gets to choose what unit he wants and what tag. And you've got to wait until all of these 5,000 people have gone through and picked their units, of which a lot of times the unit that they want is going to be sold out. So now they have to scramble to find another one. And just the whole process was a cluster for sure.
Well, we still are allowed 10% of your controlled hunts. as non-residents.
Yep.
So that didn't change. So up to 10%. It's not like there's a separate pool, but we compete with residents for those tags. And once the non-residents get to 10% of that hunt code, you're out. So now that I've raised the hackles to every resident hunter in the Rocky Mountain West by saying most of your hunting pressure is coming from residents, not non-residents, I'm going to now raise the hackles of every non-resident hunter who they're typing out the email saying, Randy and Corey, this is federal land. We shouldn't be restricted. And this is where you might want to go pull out your history book and your little pocket constitution of the United States and understand that in 1842, what's that? 178 years ago, or 178 years ago, there's a Supreme Court case, Martin versus Waddell, where the Supreme Court said, in the United States, the wildlife is held in trust by the states for the citizens of that state, no matter whether they live on public or private land.
So the state owns the wildlife.
Exactly. They hold it in trust for the citizens of their state. So the fact that Idaho grants even one non-resident hunting permit is one more than they're required to grant. South Dakota doesn't grant any non-resident elk tags. And that's their prerogative. They don't have to. So those of you who want to somehow make a connection that, and I'm not saying we should mess over the non-residents, because I'm all for non-residents coming and hunting, and the disparity in fees and percentage of tags, I'm all in favor of that too. I want each state to do what's best for their citizens first, and then offer whatever non-resident opportunity they feel is appropriate, and I'll deal with it. But those of you getting ready to send us an email that says, well, it's federal land, we should all have a fair shot at it, no. Let's take that to the next level. You're saying that because you are a quasi-owner of federal lands via your U.S. citizenship, that somehow connects you to the wildlife that lives on that land. Well, put aside the Supreme Court case that said that's not true. No matter where wildlife lives, it's held in trust by the state and managed by the state. Take that to the next logical step of, okay, if you think because you're a U.S. citizen, i.e. federal landowner, that gives you equal rights for wildlife, does that mean you would want Ted Turner, who owns hundreds of thousands of acres here in Montana, that somehow he should be granted exclusive access and tags because of his ownership of wildlife?
But isn't that how it happens in some states?
Well, it doesn't. If you get close enough to Texas, it kind of happens that way. Quasi-management of wildlife, it is the landowner in states where it's just about all private. But my point is, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, hey, I should have equal opportunity to that wildlife because it's on federal land. If you say that, then guess what? In Montana, we're 2/3 private land, 1/3 public. Does that mean 2/3 of our elk hunting opportunity should be granted to the landowners for them to sell and bargain and do what they want with? No. The Supreme Court says the wildlife is held in trust for the citizens of that state, not the citizens of the United States, but the citizens of that state within which the wildlife is standing. So,
yep, it is what it is.
Yeah, so rather than fight and argue about all this stuff, I take a little bit of history into account and say, well, that's how it is. How do I make it work for what how I like to hunt? And in fact, now I'm able to travel and hunt more. And how do I build a bigger pool of elk or a bigger pool of mule deer or a bigger herd of antelope? Because the bigger the herds, the more opportunity we all have.
Yep.
Man, I feel like I'm giving a sermon on the mountain. Sorry, Corey. My arms are flailing.
I wish we had video of this right now.
I don't. People would say, someone get a hold of that guy, man. He's about ready to go into orbit. But no, I think as hunters, it's incumbent upon us to understand what the basic framework of wildlife allocation is in the United States. The fact that the states and the state wildlife agencies are charged with managing that for the citizens of their state. And if they want to grant non-resident opportunity, that's up to each state. And some states are very generous and some are not that generous. But that's the way it is. So rather than fight and argue about that stuff, let's work on better habitat, better public access, better herds of whatever the species is, and figure out how we move the ball forward instead of fighting over who gets to play with the ball that day.
Yep.
All right. Next question.
Randy just dropped the mic and walked away.
Yeah, I'll leave you to clean up this mess I just created, Corey. I'll see you later. I can't even imagine what kind of emails we're going to get after that.
Well, you made all the residents mad, and then you made all the non-residents mad. So you pretty much, you hopefully didn't make anybody mad. Hopefully what you did was educated those that didn't realize how it worked. And that was my argument last year. People kept emailing me, you need to sign this petition. You need to use your platform to get the Fish and Game to change non-residents' access to Idaho because they're ruining hunting. And I'm like, how can you even say that? What's your science and what statistics you're using to back it up? Because the number of non-resident tags for the last 30 years has stayed the same. So there aren't more non-residents hunting the state of Idaho. There might be more non-residents in your specific area, and maybe we need to look at a solution to distribute them, which I think is what Fish and Game finally realized and attempted to do. They certainly didn't do the best job in the world this year, but I think they'll iron it out. But yeah, just this competition between residents and non-residents. Residents own the wildlife. So there shouldn't be competition. There should be non-residents who are grateful for the management of the wildlife in those states where they're allowed to go and hunt. And residents should recognize the revenue that's brought in by non-residents. And that's why we're giving them access to some of our wildlife, and realize that we're on the same team working together here. And let's not go straight to the king and say, execute them, keep them all out of here so we can have better time, because there's going to be downsides to that. There's going to be negative that comes from trying to separate everybody and make it only residents can hunt animals only in their states. Yeah,
that's not progress. We need everybody interested in the cause of wildlife and wild things in all states.
Yep.
Regardless of where the wildlife lives and regardless of where the advocate, the hunter lives, we need all of them to feel somewhat vested in the process. And that's where I think there's a lot of value in having non-resident hunters. So,
yep.
But that's I was going to go into another tangent.
we have probably. What should we end with? We should end with.
Can I end with a project that the Elk Foundation has been working on for a while?
That sounds like a really good cap for this episode.
So the Elk Foundation closed this deal or started working on this deal, had a buy-sell on it for a couple of years. And in November, it finally closed. And it's in south central Colorado. And you can go out to rmef.org and see where they have all their projects that they do and what they've done. But this one is really cool. They bought 28 acres where a road went through some private. So they bought that 28 acres that allowed the road to go through now and took down the gate. And they turned it over to the BLM. And there were 8,500 acres of public land back behind that 28 acres that previously you couldn't get to because the former owner had a gate on there, I believe. And so now there's 8,500 acres of public land in Colorado. And I could get really precise and say where it is, but then people get mad at me. Okay? I'm reading this from the Elk Foundation website, so it's out there. But anyhow, they just finally got that deal closed and the transfer of the land to the BLM. So that's cool.
So cool.
That is what I'm talking about, building a bigger pie. Because one of the things I'm realizing in Montana is with population growth, a big part of it hunter behavior, a big part of it being new landowners who just have no interest in allowing hunting. You know, the person, say you're the hedge fund manager on Wall Street and you come and buy a 40,000 acre ranch in Montana. You bought it from the good old boy who said, yeah, you know, the school teacher and the mechanic and the waitress, you guys all come out hunting here. Well, when the new guy buys it, he's like, no hunting. So one thing we are seeing is a lot more of our private lands are closed to hunting, putting more of that resident pressure on the public land. So the density, I would agree with everybody that the density of hunters on public lands is much higher now than it was 30 years ago because of population growth, but also because of displacement.
Yep.
And so when the Elk Foundation is doing stuff like this, they're identifying 8,500 acres that with buying 28 acres, you can go and get hunters on that ground. That's part of the progress I'm talking about. Building a bigger pie of a bigger herd of animals, but also making more land accessible so we can spread out more.
Yep. Let's do it. Let's do it. That just seems easy.
Yeah, but it takes money. It takes advocacy. It takes interested people. And that's why everybody should be a member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
Yeah, that's true. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go out to my Facebook page and I'm just gonna start making a bunch of negative posts to spur people to do something.
Really?
Yeah.
But Facebook, arguing on Facebook has changed. It has changed the same number of minds as I have shot unicorns. 0.
My daughter did shoot a unicorn this year.
That's right. No. Wait, we're not going to do that. we're going to encourage people, do what you can. We all have time, talent, the 3 T's, they call it, time, talent, or treasure. We all have some of maybe one of those, some time. Maybe I have some talent. Maybe I have money, but I don't have any time. And if we can allocate one of those that we have, a little bit of our time or a little bit of our talent or a little bit of our treasure to the cause of conservation and public access, that's what's going to help move this forward.
Yep.
And keep it where we have this unique model of public hunters. The United States is one of the few countries in the world where we have a public hunting population. How cool is that?
Yep.
Like I say, what a country. Greatest country in the world.
And we
can't believe I was born here.
We won't get into all of the direction we're heading down and some of my fears looking at history and other countries that used to have what we have that no longer do. But just know, as of right now, we live in a pretty good place.
Yeah. So that's the high note to leave it on, Corey.
There you go. You did it.
We weren't born in, some city of 45 million people or some country of 1 billion or whatever. Or we weren't born into a country where nobody owns firearms or nobody gets to go hunt.
Yeah.
We're lucky. Yep. In fact, I feel so lucky just thinking about that. I'm going to take my wife out and we're going to go and get a drive-through at the Dairy Queen.
I thought you were going to say you were going to go hunting. I said you've been doing that for the last 4 months.
Yeah. Well, I figured she deserves a Dairy Queen after, taking care of everything while I've been gone for 100 days.
See, that's just not fair. We don't have Dairy Queens where I'm at.
That's why I wouldn't move there if there wasn't a Dairy Queen. I got 2 of them within a half-hour drive of my house. Yeah. So, I mean, right there is your property has been devalued heavily.
Oh, yeah.
Have a Dairy Queen.
If we put a Dairy Queen here in town, my property value would probably double.
Probably.
But I would spend all of that value at Dairy Queen, so it wouldn't gain me anything.
Well, we didn't get to that many questions here, but I think we started down a path where this isn't going to be the first podcast you're going to hear this spring or this winter about these very heated arguments or debates about allocation of opportunity, costs, whatever. Send us your emails about what people are thinking about it. I mean, where do they go? Elk Talk Podcast and click the contact us.
That's it.
What they do?
Yep.
All right. And hopefully they'll do that. And we can't forget, until the end of January 31st, 2021, anyone who signs up for the Go Hunt Insider, which you should, if you want to have all the best information at your fingertips and 3D maps and everything, everyone who signs up between now and then, or is even an active Insider member who had previously used our promo code, they're in the drawing for an RMEF Life membership.
So cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to go back to our conversation on Idaho, Go Hunt has all of the statistics broken out by unit in all the states, even for the over-the-counter tags like we're talking about. So these non-residents, if your unit got sold out and there's no tag left there are still over 4,000 tags available in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 additional units right now in Idaho. And you could research all 13 of those units, even though they're over the counter. It's not a limited entry type of a thing. Over the counter, you can see the statistics on it and make an educated choice on which of those units are now your backup unit because you didn't get the tag in your unit of choice.
There you go. You should be a salesman, Corey. You find value everywhere.
I do. Maybe that's why I have no money. It's because I find value everywhere.
No, I'm with you. That's it's so easy to read a headline and think, oh, the sky's falling. You know what? Usually you should disregard the headline because it's probably most often is written by somebody who doesn't know their butt from third base. And do your own research. As though Go Hunt used to have this motto called "Be your own hunting consultant," and that's what I say. You should. Don't put this in the hands of somebody else. Do it yourself. But I've been doing it since 1995. I can't believe I've been applying in multiple states since 1995. I hope my wife doesn't listen to this podcast, because she'll do the quick math and she'll know how much money I've rat-holed into my hunting budget that she never heard about.
I think our wives already know. I think it's kind of like a teenager. They think they're getting away with things that their parents don't know, and their parents just sit there and just shake their head, and they're like, okay, yeah, go over there and help the old lady get her car battery charged again. We know what you're really doing. But I think our wives are the same way. They say, yes, honey, that's great. That's so good that you're providing organic meat for us and filling our freezer, and it's not even costing us a thing. And in the back of their mind, they're saying, I know exactly how much you're spending. I know how many days you're gone.
Yeah. Perfect example of that was yesterday. My wife says, hey, you got a call from the taxidermist. Your mountain caribou is ready to pick up. I want to come with you when you pick it up. I'm like, she never wants to go with to the taxidermist. So her and the dog jump in the truck. I go out there, then a beautiful day, trying to change the subject, thinking the eventuality is she's going to ask me, how much did that cost? And usually I pay cash for these things because then she doesn't know. Well, she hands me the checkbook and says, here. I'm like, wait a second. She's going to let this come out of the household budget? There is a catch. I'm walking into a booby trap here, and I'm so dumb as the husband of 30 years. I'm going to walk right in there anyhow because the household budget is going to pay for my mountain caribou.
Yeah, you're thinking you're the winner the whole time.
Yeah. Yep. And so I go in there, write the check, come out this unbelievable amount. I'm so impressed with it. Wrap it in blankets, put it in the back of the truck, hand her the checkbook. And she doesn't even open it to see, because, they got the duplicate copy in there. And I'm like, She wants a new car. Something's up here. So we drive home. It's about 25 minutes to my house. And we get about 5 minutes away from the house, and she opens up the checkbook and looks. It's like, She says the amount. She's just quiet. I'm like, this is the bait. This is where the trap is going to spring. She's waiting for me to respond to her comment of, $850. She didn't say anything more. We get in the house, and all yesterday afternoon, I'm walking around on pins and needles like, all right, what is it going to be? Well, this goes back to a podcast we did previously. This morning over coffee, I find out that she's buying a greenhouse, thanks to my buddy Corey, who built his wife a greenhouse.
See? It works out. See, that's a positive. You made that all sound like it was a negative conversation, but you got a caribou mount, and you didn't even have to build a greenhouse.
No, but I gotta buy one, and guess who's gonna haul all the dirt in there? Guess who's got to run make sure the electricity and everything else.
I'm guessing it's not going to be you. I'm guessing you're just going to have to find somebody to do it.
That's what I would like to do, but I don't know that there's a professional greenhouse maintenance person that you can hire. So not only am I going to pay about $5,000, so the point of this is my caribou mount did not cost $850. It cost about $5,850 because she showed me on the internet some of these greenhouse kits that you can get. By the time I pay somebody to put it together, run the power to it, and all the other things she wants, now she wants an underground, we're supposed to run water to it. I'm like, well, that's what buckets are for. We got a frost-free well pump right out here. That's what buckets are for. Oh, no. It's going to be a $5,000 bill. So this is how dumb. I knew I was walking into a trap. But did you think I could see what the trap was? Nope. Walked right into it. $5,000 later, my wife's, I'm sure she's going to have a greenhouse that makes the neighbors just envy. Yeah. All because my buddy Corey on a podcast one day, my wife overheard him say, yeah, built my wife a greenhouse this summer.
It's not my fault.
So I'm now getting to the point where I don't want to be handy. I don't want to have power tools. I'm about ready to get rid of any friends who are handy. And you are one of the handier friends that I have.
Yes, I'm at the top of your list.
You're on thin ice, my friend. I mean, you might just have to split this greenhouse with me.
Well, I was going to make another recommendation. So my wife also wanted a garden shed, and she also wanted a chicken coop. So
no way.
I built a 3-in-1. So half of the building is greenhouse, the other half is garden shed, and then on the end of it is the chicken coop.
My neighbors all have chickens.
Yeah.
I live out in the country. And much like my neighbor to the north, his dog's coming and pooping in my yard, chickens are a bloody mess, to use the UK way of saying it. They crap on everything.
They do.
They don't crap over on my neighbor's yard who owns them. They're crapping all over my yard.
Yep.
So maybe you're saying get my own chickens and send my chickens over to crap in their yard?
Totally.
Okay. All right.
Well, and that's part of what the chicken coop that we built, and there's a run attached to it also. So our chickens don't just completely range free. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'll send you the plans that I drew up to build it. And I'll send them to your wife.
No, you know that my wife handles my emails, so don't. If you send something, attention, Kim, this podcast will be a solo podcast going forward. I was cussing you so bad over coffee this morning when I'm like, well, Corey just cost me $2,500, but I got a caribou mount.
There you go. Ooh. See?
Yeah, I'll go broke at that saving that kind of money. I thought I would have been way better off to pay cash out of my sock drawer money.
Yeah, you would have.
So I don't know how we got on this topic.
Man, I
apologize.
Well, they get their money back again.
Yeah. Well, folks, send us more comments. We want to know what topics, what ideas you want to hear us talk about.
Yep.
Or
questions.
send us some.
We managed to burn an hour and a half today off one question that led down. I'm not even going to try to count the rabbit holes.
Yeah. And in the process, we've managed to offend every resident, every non-resident. Did we forget anybody?
Well, if we include residents and non-residents, that pretty much covers everybody.
There you go. Well, I appreciate that folks would even listen to us and our craziness. Hope everybody's doing well and they're healthy and happy and they got Christmas coming up. A lot to be grateful for.
Yep, and already planning next year's elk hunt. So
I know we're gonna have to jump. We're gonna have to jump into those podcasts pretty soon about how to draw in each state.
No kidding.
Huh.
Yeah.
And then when are you gonna release your Destination Elk thing?
I don't know. We had a really good plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, until we told everybody about it, and then they didn't like it. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well.
Because it's free?
Well, it was free. I mean, it is free, but we said we were going to give the University of Elk Hunting online course members get a sneak peek at it and give them first access to it. And then it'll be free for the general public at a later time, being probably mid-July, which is when the analytics are great on YouTube and all of that. But there's a few things we didn't think of. And I am definitely a listener to feedback. And we did get some negative feedback, which I knew we would. You know, Corey's just greedy. It's all about money. You know, those sort of comments, which I just delete because it's not true at all. Yeah. But, you know, people were saying it's just so convenient November through March to be able to sit down with my family each night and spend 30 straight days for an hour, family time, watching this. And that's become kind of tradition. The other thing is with us putting it just on the website, it's harder to watch it in 4K. If it's on YouTube, it's just an app on most TVs now that you just go out there and watch it. So some of those considerations were definitely taken into account, and we may be revising our launch plan in the near future.
Okay.
So yeah, well, to appease the voice of those who we are trying to appease.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
So since you got me over here offending everybody, you better be doing double duty over there and trying to soothe everybody.
Yeah, Randy goes out and does the damage, and I have to come through and do damage control. So completely changing our plan just to make up.
You're the cleanup guy.
Yep.
Yeah. I wake up every morning. My motto is I'm not happy till you're not happy.
I don't believe that for a minute.
I don't, but I had a CPA client who he was complaining about a certain person, and he told me that. I'm like, what did you say? He said, oh, he's not happy till I'm not happy. I'm like, that's a good one.
That is.
I'm going to borrow that one. Well, Corey, thanks so much for your time today.
Likewise.
Let you back. You probably got to go coach some basketball teams.
We're on our way, and just to add to the last podcast, we keep just adding on rabbit holes here, but it is important because we told people last time that I was coaching the JV team, and we have to play the number 2 varsity team in the state with our JV team because of the varsity being quarantined, and we did a bunch of scouting on their season last year because they don't have very many games this year, but they did have one game, and we watched it, and they have recruited new people that have come from the 5A school district. Ooh. They have a 6'4" kid that dunked like 6 times in their last game. He brought some of his friends with him. I mean, we're walking into a potential bloodbath out on the court tonight. So,
well, you know, I grew up in northern Minnesota where hockey was king, and I played basketball. My theory was if I had 5 fouls and I didn't use them all in the course of a game, I didn't get my money's worth. So, sometimes those big guys, you can take care of that stuff with a sharp elbow, or, it's way easier to make them, or way more. It's a better strategy to make them shoot free throws than to give them dunks and layups. I don't think anybody, when I was in the game, ever got a freebie. They were making free throws.
Yep.
And every once in a while, the ref doesn't call the foul. I'm looking at the ref like, wow, that's good. Yeah, that's like a mulligan there. I just about broke his arm. And, so there's other strategies to combat that, recruiting all the local ringers from the big 5A high school or something.
Yep.
Good. So, all right. Well, I wish you guys luck.
Yeah, we'll report back, I'm sure.
I was going to say, let me know how it goes. If you need a little bit of coaching on how to use those 5 fouls, that's where I come in.
Excellent. No, I think we'll be okay. We've got 10 players, and that's
50 fouls.
That's exactly right.
Even to keep 5 on the floor, you still got 25 fouls you can give.
That's right.
I think my coach looked at me. I was one of the 5 starters, and I think he's just like, well, we'll play Newberg until he runs out of fouls. All right.
So you got to play the first quarter of every game then, it sounds like.
Sometimes. Oh, yeah. There were a couple of refs that, in small towns, you kind of get the same refs time after time. And there were a couple of refs that are like, man, all I had to do is look at them and I got a foul. And, oh, well, it was fun. We were a pretty good team. My junior year, we didn't have any seniors. We went 16-3. In my senior year, we went 27-1 until we got to the state tournament.
Wow. And
in Minnesota at that time, there was Class AA, which was the 128 biggest schools. And then the other 480 some schools were single A. So you had to win a 64-team tournament to go to the state tournament. So my senior year, we won that 64-team tournament. So we go to this Minneapolis. We thought we were pretty good.
That's really cool.
We didn't win the state tournament, but I managed to get knocked cold in the consolation game. The scar under my eye. Some great big dude. He got even with me for all those fouls I gave people. All I remember is laying on the floor of the St. Paul Civic Center and everything's spinning around and I got blood running down my cheek. Like, man, I played 4 years of football and didn't get hurt. And look at that.
Basketball is a contact sport, and my daughter found that out. She hurt her knee last week, and we got the MRI done yesterday, and she completely tore her ACL.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Oh. So, but my point I was making about hockey being king in northern Minnesota, we played a pretty rough brand of basketball. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Like if you ever watch the movie Slapshot, I can't say we were ever putting on the foil, when the Hanson brothers are putting on the foil because they're getting ready to fight. We never got to that point, but you wanted to wear a mouth guard. All's fair in love and war. So we better go.
We had better.
Man, I hope your daughter's knee gets well.
It will.
She's got elk to hunt this fall.
Yeah, she's wanting to shed hunt this spring, so we're trying to get her in the next week or two to get it cut on and sewed back up. So
darn, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, she's a sophomore, so she's got more time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, everyone. Sorry for all the tangents, but that's how it goes in the cold of winter.
That's right. We'll have more real elk hunting topics to talk about here really soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Corey.
Yeah. Thanks, Randy. Thanks, everybody.